Have you ever really stopped to think about how a tiny little seed can grow into a massive tree? I mean, where does all that stuff come from? Or what about the very air we're breathing right now? Well, the answer to both of those questions, and so much more, is a single incredible process. We're talking about photosynthesis. And yeah, this quote on the slide really just says it all, doesn't it? It is absolutely not an exaggeration to say that pretty much every bite of food you eat and every single breath you take is thanks to plants doing their thing. We are completely 100% dependent on this process. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the big picture, why this all matters. Then we'll put on our chemistry hats and break down the ultimate recipe for life. After that, we're shrinking down, way down, to tour the little green factories where the magic happens. We'll even see how scientists proved this whole thing works. And finally, we'll zoom back out to see how it all impacts our entire planet. Okay, let's start with that big picture. Photosynthesis is like the ultimate multitasker. It's not just making food for pretty much the whole planet, it's also cranking out the very oxygen we need to live. In fact, scientists figure that photosynthesis pumps out over 100 billion tons of oxygen every single year. Just let that number sink in. Think about it like this. The next time you see a lion chasing a gazelle on a nature show, remember that the energy that lion is using ultimately came from a plant. The gazelle ate the plant, the lion ate the gazelle. Plants are the rock-solid foundation of basically every food chain on Earth. They are the original power source. So how in the world do plants pull off this incredible trick? Well, it all comes down to a brilliant chemical recipe. A recipe that nature has been perfecting for billions of years, using just a few simple ingredients to create the fuel for, well, all of us. And the ingredients are surprisingly simple. They're literally all around us. First, the plant soaks up energy from sunlight, kind of like a living solar panel. Then it drinks up water through its roots from the ground. And finally, it actually breathes in carbon dioxide from the air through these tiny little pores on its leaves. So what does it make with all that? Well, first, it creates a high-energy sugar called glucose. This is the plant's own personal energy drink, right? It fuels all its growth. And of course, that's the same energy we get when we eat the plant. And then, almost as a byproduct, a little gift to the rest of us, it releases oxygen. And for all you chemistry fans out there, this is the magic formula. Now, I know it might look a little complicated, but all it's really saying is this. The plant takes 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and 12 molecules of water, adds a dash of sunlight, and boom, it turns them into 1 molecule of glucose, that's the sugar, plus 6 molecules of oxygen and a little bit of leftover water. It's just a perfect example of nature being incredibly efficient. Okay, so we've got the recipe and we know the ingredients, but where does all the cooking actually happen? Well, to find that out, we need to shrink ourselves down to the microscopic level and take a tour of the amazing green factories that are humming away inside every single leaf. If you were to slice a leaf open and look at it under a microscope, you'd see it is a busy, bustling place. And right there in the middle, in what are called the mesophyll cells, that's the heart of the operation. You see all those tiny little green dots packed in there? Those are our factories. Every single one of those little green dots is a chloroplast. This is the powerhouse of the plant cell. It's the tiny factory where all of photosynthesis goes down. And the secret sauce that makes it all possible is a green pigment called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the plant's secret weapon. It's what allows it to grab onto the sun's energy and put it to work. And if we look even closer, inside our chloroplast factory, it's super organized, like a tiny assembly line. You've got the stroma, which is kind of like the main factory floor, where the sugar gets put together. Then you have these things called thylakoids. They're the solar panels, and they're stacked up into what we call grana. These are the real power packs, where the sun's energy gets converted. So our factory has a power source and an assembly line, but how does it all connect? Well, photosynthesis isn't just one single event. It's really a two-part play, a tale of 2 different reactions, and each one has a very specific job to do. This table here gives us a great side-by-side look. On one side, you've got the light-dependent reaction. And as you can probably guess, it needs light to work. This is the powering up stage. On the other side, you've got the light-independent reaction, also called the Kelvin cycle. This is the building stage. And the most important thing to get is that the second stage can't happen without the energy that's made in the first. They're a team. So let's look at Act 1. This is all about capturing energy. First, the chlorophyll in those solar panels soaks up the sunlight. Then, that energy is used to split water molecules apart. And this moment right here is huge, because this is when the oxygen we breathe is actually released. The captured energy then gets stored in two special molecules. Think of them like little rechargeable batteries, called ATP and NADPH. Okay, so our batteries are charged up and ready to go. Now it's time for Act 2, the grand finale, where the plant actually builds its food. The plant takes in carbon dioxide from the air. And then, using all that energy from those ATP and NADP batteries, it powers a whole series of reactions that build a sugar molecule. The final product? Glucose, the fuel for the plant and for the rest of us. Now, we've gone through the whole theory, we've toured the factory, but how do we know any of this is actually true? Well, scientists are kind of like detectives, and they've designed some really clever experiments to gather the evidence and prove that this whole process works exactly the way we've described it. So, first piece of evidence. We've said that carbon dioxide is a non-negotiable ingredient in our recipe for photosynthesis, but how can we be absolutely sure? How can we prove that a plant simply can't make food without it? Well, this classic experiment is basically the smoking gun. You put a plant under a sealed glass jar, but you add a little something extra, potassium hydroxide, or KOH. Now, KOH is like a carbon dioxide magnet. It just sucks it right out of the air. So you give the plant sunlight, you give it water, but you starve it of CO2. And what happens? Well, when you test the leaves for starch, which is just stored sugar, you find nothing. Zip. The plant couldn't make any food. Case closed. Okay, so we've proven carbon dioxide is essential. But what about the stuff the plant makes? We claim that plants release oxygen, but how can we actually catch them in the act? How do we prove that the gas coming off those leaves is the same stuff we need to breathe? This next experiment is just so elegant. You take an underwater plant, like this hydrilla here, and you put it under a funnel with a test tube over it. As the plant sits in the sunlight, you start to see these tiny bubbles floating up from the leaves and collecting in the test tube. Now for the moment of truth. You take a glowing splint, just a piece of wood that's glowing, not on fire, and you stick it in the gas, and whoosh, it bursts back into flame. That is the definitive test for oxygen. Pretty cool, right? So, we've seen the evidence, we've proven our case. We've gone from the scale of the entire planet all the way down to the tiny, microscopic world of the chloroplast. So now, let's zoom back out one last time and think about what this all really means for us and our planet. But here's a really important point. Photosynthesis isn't a process that can just go faster and faster forever. This graph shows that as you give a plant more light, the speed of photosynthesis goes up, but only to a certain point. Then it just flatlines. Why? Well, just like a real factory, a plant can only work as fast as its slowest supply line. If it runs out of carbon dioxide or if it gets too hot or too cold, it doesn't matter how much sunlight you give it. These are what scientists call limiting factors. And that leaves us with this final thought. We've seen how this incredible process, happening quietly in every single green leaf, literally provides us with the food we eat and the air we breathe. It is, no joke, the engine of life on Earth. So the question we really need to ask ourselves is, what's our role in protecting this vital power source? How do we make sure that these amazing green ecosystems can keep on thriving and keep on supporting us for generations to come?